By dismissing ancient warnings as mere myths, the Korvath Empire just made a civilization-ending mistake. For 6,000 years, the rest of the galaxy had strictly obeyed a singular mandate embedded in the Galactic Concord's oldest treaty: never cross the Orion line and never wake the Terrans. Now the Korvath have broken that silence, and they are about to discover exactly why that rule existed. In the grand archives of the Galactic Concord, the Orion sector was marked in solid, unyielding crimson. It was a dead zone, a sprawling expanse of space encompassing over 400 star systems, quarantined by ancient automated beacons that endlessly broadcasted a single, repeating algorithm, a mathematical translation of a skull and crossbones. For over 6,000 years, the prevailing galactic theory was that the Terrans, a mythical hyper-aggressive primate species from a yellow dwarf star, had annihilated themselves in a localized cataclysm. The older, wiser species, like the deeply philosophical Altari, maintained the quarantine out of respect for the dead. The younger species avoided it out of superstition. But the Korvath Empire was neither respectful nor superstitious. They were an apex predator species, reptilian in ancestry, driven by a rigid doctrine of manifest destiny. Under the command of High Chancellor Vorik, the Korvath had subjugated 3 neighboring spiral arms in less than a century. Their war machine was fueled by a ravenous need for raw materials, specifically zero-point energy cores and hyperdense exotic matter. According to their deep space telemetry, the dead Orion sector was saturated with it. On standard galactic date 844.12, Fleetmaster Taran of the Korvath Vanguard stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dreadnought Vindicator. He was a veteran of 40 campaigns, a scarred tactician who had brought the Lyran Alliance to its knees. Now, he stared at the holographic projection of the Sol system, the supposed cradle of the mythical Terrans. "Radiation levels are negligible," reported Sub-Commander Kael, his scales clicking as his digits danced across the sensory console. "No energy signatures matching known shield technologies, no active plasma drives. The system is dormant, Fleet Master," just as the scouts reported. Taran sneered, his mandibles flaring in a gesture of contempt. 6,000 years, the galaxy cowered from a graveyard. Look at their orbital structures. The main view screen magnified the space surrounding the third planet, a blue-green marble marred by vast, continent-sized craters from some forgotten conflict. Orbiting the world and its unusually large moon was a ring of debris. But it wasn't just rocks. It was a perfectly equidistant grid of massive brutalist space stations. They were unpainted, scarred, forged from cold titanium and tungsten, utterly lacking the aesthetic grace of modern galactic architecture. They looked less like ships and more like floating anvils. "Scan the largest structure," Taran ordered. "Scanning," Kyle replied. "Structure designated Aegis Prime. It possesses a massive internal density, minimal power output. It appears to be running on localized geothermal or low-grade nuclear decay. Fleetmaster, the hull is comprised of alloys we cannot easily categorize. Scans indicate immense stockpiles of refined helium-3 and stable antimatter containment units." Taran's eyes gleamed. Just one of those stations held enough fuel to power the Korvath Armada for a decade. "The cowards of the Concord left a treasure trove unguarded. Helm, bring us into a low orbit. Prepare the mining lasers. We will strip these husks to the bulkheads." As the Vindicator and its escort of 20 heavy cruisers crossed the orbital threshold of the moon, They breached an invisible tripwire. It wasn't a laser grid, nor was it a plasma web. It was a tachyon pulse detection network, a technology so archaic, yet so violently effective that Korvath sensors didn't even register it. Deep beneath the lunar surface, in a cavern carved out by thermonuclear excavation millennia ago, something stirred. In the subterranean command center of Lunar Base Alpha, dust cascaded from the ceiling as a massive central processing core hummed to life. The AI, designated Overlord, ran a diagnostic check that took exactly 0.004 seconds. Threat detected. Non-Terran vessels. Korvath Empire classification. Hostile posture. Quarantine breached. Executing protocol. Lazarus. Rows upon rows of cryogenic pods, stretching into the dark abyss of the lunar crust, suddenly illuminated with a harsh amber light. The hiss of depressurization echoed through the silent halls. Defrosting chemicals flushed through the veins of the occupants, shocking dormant hearts back into rhythm. In Pod Command 01, Fleet Admiral Jonathan Hayes violently gasped for air. He convulsed against the restraints, coughing up viscous pink cryofluid. The physical agony of reanimation was a fire in his nerves, but his military conditioning overrode the pain. Beside him, the pod of his chief medical officer, Dr. Abigail Croft, opened with a similar hiss. "Vitals stabilizing," a cold, synthesized voice announced overhead. "Welcome back, Admiral Hayes. You have been in stasis for 6,214 years." Hayes ripped the IV lines from his forearms, stepping out of the pod onto the freezing metal floor. He didn't ask where he was, or what year it was. He was a soldier of the United Earth Directorate, the supreme commander of a species that had conquered the horrors of the void through sheer, unrelenting willpower. "Give me a sit-rep, Overlord," Hayes rasped, his voice raw. He reached for a thermal jacket hanging in the locker adjacent to his pod, tossing one to Dr. Croft, who was shivering violently. "An alien armada has breached the Sol Aegis," the AI replied, projecting a tactical hologram in the center of the waking chamber. 21 vessels. They are currently attempting to carve into orbital station Aegis Prime using low-yield plasma cutters. They possess energy shields, plasma-based weaponry, and standard FTL capabilities. Hayes stared at the projection. The aliens were clustered tightly together, confident, arrogant. Dr. Croft wrapped the jacket around herself, her teeth chattering. "John, did the Concorde fail? Did they forget the treaty?" "It doesn't matter," Hayes said, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the fleet formations. "They crossed the line. Overlord, status of the sleeper fleet." "The Leviathan-class dreadnoughts are fully fueled and awaiting crew. The orbital defense grid is 70% operational. Automated kinetic batteries are primed. Shall I initiate a warning broadcast?" Hayes looked at the holographic readout. He saw the Korvath plasma cutter burn through the outer hull of Aegis Prime, a station containing 300,000 sleeping human civilians and support staff. "No," Hayes said, his voice dropping to a terrifying calm. "They didn't knock. We don't to talk. Wake the gunners. Depressurize the silos. Let's remind the galaxy why we went to sleep in the first place." Aboard the Vindicator, Fleetmaster Taran watched with satisfaction as the mining lasers slowly chewed through the thick titanium armor of the ancient station. It was slow work. The alien alloy was absurdly dense, layered with reactive plating that seemed to absorb the heat. "Their metallurgy is crude, but stubborn," Subcommander Kyle observed. "We will breach the inner vault in approximately—" Kyle stopped. His scales paled. turning a sickly shade of grey. "Report," Taran barked. "Fleetmaster, energy signatures, all around us." Kael's fingers flew across the console, his voice trembling. "The debris field. It isn't a debris field. They are weapon silos. Thousands of them. And they are powering up." Taran rushed to the main display. The silent, dead space around the moon was suddenly alive. The dark side of the lunar surface was lighting up with massive, fiery thruster plumes. The rock faces were sliding apart, revealing subterranean hangars the size of cities. "Evasive maneuvers!" Taran roared. "Raise the thermal shields to maximum." "Sir, they aren't using plasma," Kael screamed, staring at the telemetry. "Incoming projectiles! Solid matter, they are moving at by the gods, they are moving at 0.05 of light speed." Before Taran could issue another order, the human retaliation arrived. Humanity, during their apex, had not invested heavily in energy weapons. They found plasma too volatile, lasers too easily dispersed by atmospheric conditions or mirrored shielding. Instead, the Terrans had perfected the art of throwing rocks, very, very large rocks, propelled by electromagnetic rails, moving so fast that their kinetic energy rivaled tactical nuclear warheads. From the lunar surface, a battery of 50 magnetic accelerator cannons, MAX, fired simultaneously. There was no bright flash of laser light, no colorful beams. In the vacuum of space, there was only the silent, invisible death of depleted uranium slugs, weighing 3 tons each, crossing the void in a fraction of a second. The Korvath cruiser, blood-sworn, positioned on the Vindicator's starboard flank, took the first hit. The thermal shields, designed to dissipate heat and absorb energy weapons, offered zero resistance to physical mass moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten slug punched through the cruiser's bow, shattered its spinal keel, and exited the engineering section at the stern. The kinetic shockwave inside the hull instantly vaporized the atmosphere, turning the crew into ash before the ship itself detonated in a violent, expanding sphere of blue drive plasma. Taran was thrown to the deck as the Vindicator rocked violently. "Return fire, all batteries." "We have no targets," Kael yelled in a panic. "The projectiles are being fired from inside the moon's crust. Their ships... Fleetmaster, their ships are undocking." From the massive underground hangars, the human sleeper fleet emerged. They were behemoths. The lead ship, the USS Oppenheimer, was a 5-kilometer-long wedge of black armor, bristling with thousands of point defense turrets and heavy rail guns. It didn't glide with the grace of the Korvath vessels. It thrust itself forward with brutal, raw chemical and nuclear propulsion, leaving a trail of radioactive fire in its wake. Inside the Combat Information Center of the Oppenheimer, Admiral Hayes stood in his tactical gear, fully integrated into the ship's neural network. The bridge was a flurry of chaotic efficiency. Captain William Kessler, the ship's commanding officer, barked orders to the newly awakened crew, who had transitioned from 6,000 years of sleep to a combat footing in less than 10 minutes. "Target the lead dreadnought," Hayes ordered coldly. "Load shredder rounds. I want their propulsion disabled. I want them stranded." "Firing," Kessler confirmed. Hundreds of smaller cannons along the Oppenheimer's hull barked. Instead of solid slugs, these cannons fired canisters that burst mid-flight, unleashing millions of jagged, hyperdense, tungsten ball bearings. It was a cosmic shotgun blast. The cloud of metal slammed into the Vindicator and its remaining escorts. The Korvath thermal shields were utterly useless against the physical onslaught. The bearings shredded the alien ship's external sensors, communications arrays, and the delicate magnetic containment nozzles of their plasma drives. Aboard the crippled Vindicator, emergency klaxons blared. Red warning lights bathed the bridge in blood-colored hues. Taran pulled himself up, clutching a fractured arm. The bridge crew was dead or dying, pierced by shrapnel that had spalled off the interior bulkheads from the kinetic impacts. "Status!" Taran gasped, coughing on the smoke filling the room. Kyle was slumped over his console, a jagged piece of metal protruding from his shoulder. Drives, offline. Weapons, offline. "Fleet Master, we have lost 16 ships. The remaining 5 are crippled. The enemy fleet. They haven't even raised their shields." Taran looked at the view screen. The massive black wedge of the Oppenheimer hung in space right in front of them, entirely unblemished. Behind it, 50 more ships of equal or greater size were rising from the moon. And behind them, the automated factories on the Earth below were already glowing red with the heat of industry, churning out fresh ammunition. This wasn't a dead species. It wasn't a fallen empire. Taran suddenly realized the horrifying truth of the Orion line. The Terrans hadn't quarantined their sector because they were hiding from the galaxy. They had quarantined themselves to protect the galaxy from them. They had grown disgusted with their own capacity for slaughter, tired of conquering, and had chosen to sleep until the rest of the universe could challenge them on equal terms. And now, the Korvath Empire had awoken them. A sudden burst of static overrode the Vindicator's internal audio systems. The encryption was violently bypassed in seconds. A voice spoke in perfect, flawlessly translated Korvathian. "This is Fleet Admiral Jonathan Hayes of the United Earth Directorate." The voice was devoid of anger, which made it all the more terrifying. It was the calm voice of an exterminator addressing a termite infestation. "You have breached the Sol quarantine. You have fired upon a civilian stasis facility. By the laws of the Geneva Protocols, you are hereby designated an existential threat to humanity." Taran dragged himself to the comms panel. "We surrender. Terran Commander, we claim the rights of the vanquished under the Concord." "We are not members of your Concord," Hayes replied coldly. "And we do not take prisoners from those who attack our sleepers. Overlord, trace their hyperspace jump vectors. Find out where they came from." "Trace complete, Admiral," the AI's voice echoed over the open channel. "Coordinates locked on the Korvath homeworld, system designated Prime Gorgon." "Good," Hayes said. "To the alien commander, your ship will be left adrift so you can watch what happens next. You woke us up. Now, we are going to finish the war you started." The comms cut out. Taran collapsed into his command chair, his reptilian eyes wide with sheer terror. Outside the shattered viewport, the human armada turned away from the moon. Their massive sublight engines flared a brilliant, blinding blue. In perfect, terrifying synchronization, the fleet of black iron behemoths tore a hole in the fabric of space and vanished into slipspace, heading straight for the heart of the Korvath Empire. The galaxy had forgotten the rule, and now billions were going to burn to relearn it. Prime Gorgon was a world of monumental vanity. The Korvath homeworld was a sprawling ecumenopolis, its surface entirely paved in dark obsidian metal and illuminated by the harsh, crimson glow of towering plasma refineries. Orbiting the planet was the pride of the Empire, the home fleet. 300 heavily armed battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, and orbital defense platforms formed an impenetrable web of energy shielding and plasma lances. Deep within the Grand Citadel, High Chancellor Vorek observed the galactic map. His reptilian eyes narrowed as the communication relay from Fleetmaster Taran's vanguard suddenly went dark. "Loss of telemetry in the Orion sector, Chancellor," a subordinate hissed, bowing low. The Vindicator and its escorts have ceased broadcasting, Vorik scoffed, adjusting his ceremonial armor. A minor setback. The automated defenses of the dead species must have been more robust than anticipated. Taran is a fool if he let obsolete drones overwhelm him. Prepare a second vanguard. I want that sector stripped. A klaxon, deafening and shrill, interrupted him. The holographic map of the galaxy flashed a blinding, urgent yellow. "Chancellor!" the sensor officer shrieked. "Mass shadows detected. Slipspace ruptures opening within our gravity well. It is impossible. Nothing can bypass our hyperspace interdiction field." "Put it on the screen!" Vorik roared. The view screen shifted from the tactical map to a live feed of high orbit. Space itself seemed to tear open, bleeding Cherenkov radiation. From the violent, swirling blue vortexes of the slipspace ruptures, the human armada emerged. They did not glide into the system. They detonated into it. The USS Oppenheimer led the charge, flanked by the Constitution, the Enterprise, and 50 other monoliths of black iron. Their hulls were forged from hyperdense metamaterials, a direct, brutal evolution of classified armor plating first developed millennia ago by real-world human defense contractors like Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin, long before the Earth unified. This wasn't elegant alien crystal or fragile energy-conductive alloy. This was cold, hard, unapologetic mass. The Korvath home fleet scrambled. 300 ships turned their plasma batteries toward the intruders. "Intruder vessels, you have entered sovereign Korvath space," the automated defense network broadcasted. "Surrender or be vaporized." Aboard the Oppenheimer, Admiral Jonathan Hayes stood with his arms crossed behind his back. The bridge was deathly quiet, save for the rhythmic pinging of targeting computers, locking onto 300 distinct hostile signatures. "Admiral, we are receiving a priority transmission," Captain William Kessler announced, his fingers flying across his console. "But it's not from the Korvath. It's a tight beam encryption from outside the system. Concord signatures. Altari origin." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Put it through." A holographic projection of an Altari, a tall, slender being of translucent blue skin and elongated limbs, flickered to life. It was Ambassador Cylon, a senior diplomat of the Galactic Concord. "Admiral Hayes," the Altari spoke, its voice trembling with a mixture of awe and profound terror. "The Concord begs you to halt. We did not authorize the Korvath incursion. We have maintained the Orion line for 6,000 years, just as the Treaty of Geneva dictated when your ancestors entered the Great Sleep. Please, do not unleash the fire again. The galaxy cannot survive another human crusade." Hayes stared at the alien diplomat. "Ambassador, the treaty was simple. We promised to lock ourselves away, to give the younger species of this galaxy a chance to evolve, to govern, to thrive without our interference. We put ourselves in chains because we recognized our own destructive nature. We gave you one rule: do not wake us." "The Korvath are arrogant. They did not know." "Ignorance is not an excuse for breaching a quarantine, Cylon," Hayes interrupted, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "They attacked a civilian stasis facility. They tried to crack open Aegis Prime. If they had succeeded, 300,000 of my people would have suffocated in their sleep. The time for diplomacy ended the second their lasers touched our hull." Hayes turned away from the hologram, looking out the viewport at the massive, glowing Korvath fleet. "Cut the feed, Captain Kessler. Initiate electronic warfare protocol, Babel." The human fleet didn't fire a single physical weapon yet. Instead, they unleashed a barrage of directed electromagnetic pulses and localized logic bombs. The human cyber warfare divisions had spent centuries simulating alien network architectures. In a matter of seconds, the Korvath targeting sensors went completely blind. Their communication channels dissolved into deafening static. "They are firing blindly, Admiral," Kessler reported calmly, as green and red plasma bolts from the Korvath fleet scattered harmlessly into empty space, missing the black-armored dreadnoughts by miles. "Let's show them what real firepower looks like," Hayes said. "Authorize a localized Kessler grid deployment. Target their orbital defense platforms. Full broadside." Along the flanks of the human vessels, massive armored shutters slid open. There was no light, no sound in the vacuum, just the terrifying, synchronized recoil of 3,000 heavy magnetic accelerator cannons. The bombardment hit the Korvath home fleet like a hammer striking glass. The hypervelocity depleted uranium slugs bypassed the Korvath thermal shields entirely, tearing through the battle cruisers as if they were made of wet paper. Ships shattered, their plasma cores detonating in cascading supernovas that consumed neighboring vessels. In less than 4 minutes, 180 Korvath warships were reduced to a rapidly expanding cloud of molten slag and frozen corpses. On the surface below, Chancellor Vorik collapsed to his knees, watching the sky rain fire as the debris of his invincible fleet burned up in the atmosphere. "By the gods," he whispered, his claws digging into his own scales. "What are they?" The remaining Korvath ships attempted to flee, powering up their hyperspace drives to scatter into the void. "They are spooling up FTL, Admiral," the tactical officer, Lieutenant Robert Hughes, called out. "Deny them," Hayes ordered. "Deploy the gravity well generators." From the underside of the Oppenheimer, 4 massive cylindrical pods dropped into space. They activated with a violent pulse of gravity-distorting energy, creating an artificial mass shadow equivalent to a small star. The escaping Korvath ships, caught in the sudden gravitational shear, had their FTL drives violently rip themselves apart. Engines imploded, leaving the survivors dead in the water. The orbit of Prime Gorgon belonged entirely to humanity. Aboard the Oppenheimer, Captain Kessler looked at the tactical display. "Orbital superiority achieved, Admiral. The planetary defense grid is offline. We have a clear firing solution on all major population centers, military installations, and industrial hubs. Shall I give the order to commence orbital bombardment?" The bridge crew waited. This was the moment of truth. 6 millennia ago, humanity had glassed the previous apex empire to extinction, earning the terror of the galaxy before choosing exile. Hayes looked down at the sprawling, glowing cityscapes of the alien homeworld. Trillions of lives down there. Billions of innocent civilians who had no say in their chancellor's greed. "No," Hayes said softly, the silence of the bridge magnifying his voice. Kessler blinked, surprised. "Sir, if we glass this world, we prove the Concord right. We prove that we are nothing but monsters," Hayes said, stepping up to the main tactical console. "But we cannot let this aggression go unpunished. The Korvath are a predator species. If we leave, they will rebuild, and they will hold a grudge. We need to neutralize the threat permanently, without committing genocide." Hayes pulled up a schematic that hadn't been used since the early 21st century. A theoretical concept originally proposed by real-world NASA scientist Donald Kessler. "Captain Kessler, prep the automated mining drones. Have them gather the wreckage of the Korvath fleet, along with the asteroids in this system's outer belt." "What are we building, Admiral?" "A cage," Hayes replied, his eyes cold. "We are going to weaponize their own orbit against them." For the next 72 hours, the human fleet didn't fire another shot. Instead, The galaxy watched in horrific fascination as the Terrans went to work. Automated drones towed millions of tons of shattered armor, asteroid rock, and irradiated debris into a low planetary orbit. Using shaped kinetic charges, the humans accelerated this debris, creating a dense, localized storm of hypervelocity shrapnel that encapsulated the entire planet. It was a self-sustaining cascade of destruction, a perfectly engineered Kessler syndrome. Any ship attempting to launch from the surface would be shredded by debris moving at 30,000 miles per hour. Any missile fired from the ground would detonate prematurely. The Korvath homeworld was perfectly intact, its people alive, its atmosphere breathable. But they could never, ever leave. They were entombed alive beneath a sky of swirling, lethal iron. When the cage was complete, Admiral Hayes opened a wide-band, unencrypted channel, broadcasting to every system, every listening post, and every emperor in the galactic concord. People of the Milky Way, this is Fleet Admiral Jonathan Hayes of the United Earth Directorate. His voice echoed through the grand halls of the Altari, across the trading hubs of the Orion Spur, and into the dark, terrified bunkers of Prime Gorgon. 6,000 years ago, we recognized that our capacity for war was unmatched, and therefore unjustified. We put our weapons down. We went to sleep. We gave you an empty playground, asking only for solitude in return. The broadcast displayed the live feed of the Korvath homeworld, trapped within its impenetrable shell of raging debris. The Korvath Empire believed our slumber was a weakness. They were wrong. Let this world serve as a monument to our new diplomatic policy. We are no longer sleeping. We are the wardens of this galaxy. You are free to trade, free to live, and free to prosper. But if you conquer, if you enslave, if you cross the lines we draw, we will not destroy you. We will simply lock you in the dark and throw away the key. The transmission ended. In the long, deafening silence that followed, the Galactic Concord hurriedly rewrote their ancient treaties. The maps were updated. The crimson warning markers around the Orion sector were expanded, covering a third of the galaxy. The rule had evolved. It was no longer "do not wake the humans." It was "do not anger the wardens." And the galaxy, unified by absolute, undeniable terror, finally found peace. If you loved this terrifying dive into humanity's dark, dominant sci-fi future, you need to join our community. Smash that like button to support the channel. Share this story with a fellow HFY sci-fi fanatic, and make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on so you never miss out on our epic, universe-shattering tales. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you woke up after 6,000 years to an alien invasion? Stay stellar, and see you next time.